Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Rugby. I hope you're keeping well. It's very good to have you back with us again. My name is Alex Payne. The Hask and the Lord are here. We're back in our glossy new studio. Before we get into the legendary guest that we've got on the show this week, a quick announcement. We are very proud to announce that for the next 5 weeks, we have partnered once again with City Index, who are the global provider of spread betting, CFD and Forex trading. They are the official sponsor of Saracens. And alongside the top guests that we got over the next few weeks, we are obviously going to be covering all things Lions as they head into the Test series with South Africa. It's going to be a mammoth few weeks on that front. And to add to this, we're also going to be running multiple competitions with merch, tickets and experiences up for grabs. Do keep a lookout across our social channels to enter. A massive thanks to City Index for partnering with us during one of the most anticipated times within the rugby calendar. Here is to a very exciting few weeks ahead. And as excitement comes towards us, we've got to start with the disappointment that falls behind us. Wembley. We're a rugby show, but first things first. You were there. Talk us through it.
Yeah.
Brutal?
Yeah. I've never seen that. I don't claim to... I'm a lad from up north, comfortable in most situations, but it was weird last night. It was genuinely, if I was there with my kids, I would not have been that happy about it. And obviously, it's two guys who didn't have tickets. That was the problem. Obviously, walking down Wembley Way was a disgrace. The amount of just shit, litter. Like people who just generally didn't seem to care about anything. It's a small minority, but it's unfortunately the minority that you only remember. And, trying to get into the stadium took forever because people without tickets, people had taken photos of their tickets on their phone and were all trying to get through. Some people with actual tickets couldn't get through because their mate had obviously taken a photo of it and used it to get through, and you can only get through once. So people were then trying to get double people through the turnstiles. The stewards can't do anything. It was just something I've never witnessed before. And then all the people without tickets would just stand in the stairways. Stewards are telling them to sit down. They don't give a shit because the stewards can't do anything to them. And then it ends up, there's a guy who was there the whole time, smashed out of his face, literally didn't watch any of the game anyway. He was just too busy shouting at supporters that they should be standing on their feet. Ends up getting into a fight with another one that's straight behind my seat. Hopefully you were looking at a situation where they were both drunk, they just fall over, then they get up and they go their separate ways. Then it got to a stage where this guy literally was trying to pile this guy in the there's like, there's a 5-year, he must have been 5 with his dad, just trying to watch there. There was a 5-year-old there, there was a kid next to us, there was a kid on the other side crying because he couldn't see the game because of all the guys stood in the galleyway. And I had to sort of just pull these guys apart. And I'm like, said to one of them, "What are you doing? Just what are you doing?" And then, he wandered off, blood all over him. The guy on the floor had blood all over him. I was just like, these kids, what are they learning about going to a live football game? And it was, I was trying to put some balance on it, but there wasn't balance. It was just, and then going out and seeing the amount of smash bottles on the way out, the amount that you could feel people be nervous walking out of there. We all knew that if England won, it would be the best night ever. If they lost, it's like board up your shops. And why do we have to have that mentality? It's just absolutely ridiculous. And it was an unsavoury environment to be in. And I was saying I wouldn't have enjoyed being there if I had my kids there or anything.
Oh, that's a really sad note on which to start. I understand, and we're hearing it more and more.
But it takes away. I was surprised. The problem is, it takes away. I put a tweet out last night about how good that team has been in terms of, for the first time ever, you look at, you've got a real gathering around the team, Gareth Southgate, everything that they've done over their journey of the Euros and the build up to the Euros, and you finally got, you've got the media actually speaking highly about them and what they're doing, not only on the pitch, but what like the likes of Marcus Rashford is doing off the pitch. And you feel that you're on this journey, and then you just walk into where a small minority of people who, the ones who just kick down the barriers and just total disrespect because they want to be in there. I know everyone wants to be in there, but that's the nature of the beast. That's why you put on fan zones to go and celebrate it in that way. But it's just, I feel it undermines what that England team has done, and that's the biggest shame for me. Is I think they've really sort of galvanised the country after a really bad period, and in one night it feels like it's somewhat broken.
Couldn't agree with you more. I just wonder, I don't know how you do it, but it's the same almost with social media, how you find a way to block, ignore, and not oxygenate the minority. It's the same on social media. It's the same with the idiots last night. Let's move on to other things. The one thing before we actually get to Brian, I did want to ask you about is just that element of pressure. And it was suffocating. And I mean, I remember putting out a few years ago a tweet saying, will I ever see England win a major football tournament in my lifetime? And I'm not a massive football fan. I love it. I get into it on nights like last night.
Hence the hoarse voice.
Hence the hoarse voice. Yeah. I so desperately wanted them to do it, and I completely agree with you. It's sort of, there's something almost quite reassuring about the way it ended, because that's English and that's what we know. But I'd love to ask both of you, and you said you wouldn't have ever been able to do what they did last night, and I couldn't agree with you more about me, not necessarily you, but the moments in your career where that pressure, I mean, because you famously in 2003 were just like, this is why we play the game, still. Was that genuine sort of excitement for what was to come? And can you think of a moment like, the three guys who went up last night where you just thought, flipping heck, this is so uncomfortable. I don't know how I'm going to handle it.
Yeah, I don't know whether any person in any other sport can experience what it is like to go and take a penalty to win a major tournament.
I think you're absolutely right in that.
I don't think any other sportsman can do that. I mean, yes, I talked about 2003, but that's about the whole game. I was fully confident in my ability, and this was going to be the biggest game of my life. But I also had spent a lot of time thinking of my approach during the week, and my approach was, this is the biggest game, but it's just the same game. You've played this opposition 4 times. You've never lost to them. It's the same. Don't let the occasion deter from, take away your focus from what the game is. You just turn up, you play, and that's what you do. You give it your all. And that was one of my strengths, was that's how I could approach a game mentally. Now, I always say I perform better under pressure because I quite like it. I quite like to know that people are watching. So if you fail, you have that mass exposure of failing. But if you succeed, you have the mass exposure of being in that place where you succeed. So I always think I would quite like to take a penalty in that situation. But I would never know. I would definitely be nervous going up there. But would I still be able to carry that nervousness into excited nervousness? I think it's one of the most precious situations you could be in as a sportsman. You're playing a team sport, so majority of your life is based around the 11 people around you. And then for 30 seconds in your life, you don't have the Harry Kane follow-up, knock it back in, for what it is 30 seconds where you are completely isolated on your own in an environment that you're not supposed to be in because you're playing a team sport. So I think it's the unique. I think all I've got is a massive amount of admiration for Rashford, Sancho, the guys who just stood up, all of them young,
Saka, yeah.
and went, "I'll take one." Because to do that, you look around, you've got your Sterlings, you've got the more experienced players, and they've obviously stood up and said, "I want to hit one."
I think it was this is what everyone keeps saying, it was pre-picked based on what had happened in training, and Rashford hadn't missed in training.
I'll say 2 things, actually, when you say that in sport. Well, Stefan Armitage kicked Biarritz into the top 14 with a penalty shootout from the place kick. Jordan Crane kicked Leicester. So you have those bizarre moments in rugby, and I love Stefan Armitage. He's an incredible player, and to see him do that in the passion, that for me is a moment that I can't kick for toffee, so I would never have had that. But I thought, as a player, when it goes well, you single-handedly become a hero, which in our sport, like Johnny Wilkinson became a hero for you guys because he did an individual skill in a team game. But very, very few of us get to do that. You might score a winning try every now and then, but those kind of solo moments, as you say, are pretty unknown in our sport. I will say, what gets for me with the pressure is, I don't know if you get like this, but sometimes when I walk out the front door and you smell the air and it's an early morning, it triggers a memory of something, like a place. Like sometimes I walk out the front of my house, it smells like an early morning in New Zealand, or I walk out and I'm reminded of Japan, or I was staying in a hotel recently and it reminded me of being on tour with the England team. Just same sort of setup, same sort of vibe, early morning. I felt like I was going to training. It kind of triggered all these memories. And what I have on those nights, of these football nights, is a reminder of those night games, with England, with the pre-build-up, the hype in the week. You've talked about it. The fans are there. I've seen it from a fan's point of view, where they're sort of in bars. That you have that moment. You run out to the stadium. It's fresh night air. You think this could hold any possibility. We're gonna do what we're gonna do, and then you get that game underway, and I can recall 3 Grand Slams, 2 World Cup failures. Those moments where anything's going to happen, and then suddenly the game gets out of your control, or there is this moment, or you might get an injury, or you might get a yellow card, or you might give them a penalty away, or something may have happened, and it's suddenly you realise it descends. And what happens is everybody there goes home and gets on with their lives and may talk about it, but you're left in that moment. You're left pulling a strapping off in the change room, looking at your teammates with that fear of like, we fucked it. Like there's no way to get about. What the whole place is full of what ifs, and it's a very lonely place to be. And then you traipse back to the hotel and you shut that hotel room. And if you're not sharing with someone, you're sort of staring at the wall, and you have all of those emotions. You're still aching and sore, and it's the weirdest thing. And every time I see those games, I am transformed back to those moments in my career where we should have won Grand Slams, and suddenly we lose to Wales or to Ireland 30 points, 25 points, 40 points, and there's no one to turn. And the worst feeling of that pressure is nobody can make it better. And you look at Saka's face and Rashford's face, we're all going, it's disappointed. I've been there where I've done something like them, or I've been part of a team that's lost, and there is nothing that anybody can say that will ever make it better, and you will just be haunted. And then it becomes an association, and because of the way the mind works, and it's such a powerful tool. Like my memories are triggered by smells and sights and sounds. It's the same way of the association of that pressure, and then until you break that, until we won like the Grand Slam against France, that cycle wasn't broken, because you go, here we go again.
It's funny you said that, because literally once you'd got past the stale ale of the walk-in and everything else, sat there, we watched the first half, and then I went to the toilet and came back, and as I came down the stairs and I sat back down, obviously the night air had changed and that dewiness had gone onto the grass, and I got that smell of nighttime games. I said to Zed, I was like, I love that smell. That means it's game night. And she was like, I actually love that smell, because that's what you smelled of when you came off. And that's my memories. Yeah. And I was like, I'm so excited now, because I used to love going to a ground and then you get that smell of the dew on the grass. And I was like, right, we're on. And it was so weird that it made me more into the game. Second half, I've never been sort of dialed in to watching. I'd quite happily say I generally, a paper Leeds United fan, and I will watch big tournaments and get into them. But I was so dialed in about trying to figure out how the tactics were working and what they were trying to do and everything like that. And yeah, it was gutting for them, because I felt that they had it there in their hands. But I think they'll learn from that. I think we always talk about that learning curve of you have to lose to then understand what you've got to change, and I think this England team showed that they can evolve, and I think that they'll do it again.
Fingers crossed. What a roller coaster, and I think we're an egg-shaped pod, but huge respect to those who've gone out and done what they've done in that jersey with 3 lines on it. Couple of very quick bits before we welcome Brian in. Marcus Smith.
Yes.
I mean, talking of flipping it round to positivity, the fearlessness of youth, and just an absolute wild card from Gatland. You were there on Saturday.
Yeah, I was at both the England games doing some stuff for O2, and it was amazing. The first game against the USA, even though we're both convincing kind of victories, when Marcus Smith touched the ball and scored in the first game, louder cheer than everyone else. He's obviously captured the imagination of the Twickenham crowd, and I thought he looked in control. He obviously looks great and everything else. And actually, at that second game, we were watching it, and Channel 4 announced on live on TV he's been called up for the Lions, but he doesn't know.
I think Sky did it. Yeah, you tell me whether.
Oh, well, I was watching Channel 4, so I can't. Well, it was on and things. So if you want to claim it, you claim it. I doesn't matter. Right.
The idea was that did he actually know?
No, he had no idea.
He was the only person in West London who didn't know he was going on a Lions tour.
But interestingly, I said to Ellis after the game, who I thought had an absolute stormer.
What, and captain of?
Yeah,
his
it was brilliant.
well.
You called it. You called it, captain.
Somebody said it.
You did. You called Ellis.
I tell you what, this pod is like the
we're changing the world.
Mystic Meg.
Yeah.
And we're just going to pick lottery numbers at the end of the show. So stay tuned.
Tell them me first. But no, I met his little boy Rafa as well, who was fascinated by my beard. Which I quite liked. But he had an amazing game, and I said to him, what did you see anything about Marcus? He goes, yeah, someone was shouting to Marcus, "You're a lion, you're a lion," after he'd scored a try, and Ellis was like, "He's good, mate, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's that good." Like having a joke. And then obviously in the stadium, when he got hoiked off, Richard Hill and the team manager took him down the tunnel. And Channel 4 had this incredible moment of emotion, which is what a sport's all about. Even though last night for England, that is what the tapestry of sport is all about. Those highs, those lows, the emotions, the sport in itself. It's the journey as it is in everything in life. And you saw him taking down the tunnel. And he had hands on knees, and Channel 4 had this moment. And then for fucking someone that must have in the truck, goes, oh, we need to cut to a crowd, cut to some idiots in the crowd, go, and then they went back to Marcus, and they'd missed this raw emotion moment because he was back smiling. But you saw that when he bent over, it was sort of this sledgehammer shot where all of the emotion had gone out, and we just played 65 minutes of a game. And I was lucky enough to speak to him afterwards, and he's such a lovely guy. B, incredibly kind of excited about what's going to happen, and I think rightly deserves it. And he was just sort of, it's one of those things where it hadn't really sunk in. I mean, I even asked him for a photo just to stay relevant with the it's like
but it makes your lid look really bad.
It does. My lid looked really bad, but it also made him look about 10, which I'll take. But he was brilliant, and I think I think it's fantastic that Warren's put him in the squad, whether he plays or not. The one passing bit of thing I gave to him, even though he wasn't asking advice, but not many people do, was that just to enjoy every single moment of it. Because yes, you've got to train the house down. I said that, but I said to him, look, you just enjoy those moments, because you will never get you will never get those moments again where you have the opportunity to bond with people. And this is something I want to ask our next guest as to whether, what was it like, that emotional journey, meeting people that you consistently fought against and built this rivalries with? What was it like? And I hope he goes there like a sponge, and I think it'll make him a better player and make him more confident, because you suddenly go behind enemy lines and see those people that are, the Dan Biggers, the Finn Russells, the people that he'll be playing against, potentially for England, seeing what makes them tick, but also make friends with them, and then ideally push them down a well if you get a chance.
Fascinating times, very exciting times for Marcus Smith as well. Okay, before we move into our main guest, it's a quick reminder, you are listening to The Good, The Bad and The Rugby in partnership with City Index, and we're talking about the fact that the Lions is only live once, don't miss it. In terms of the rugby, we're obviously heading pretty quickly now towards the Test series. We're about to start really speculating and debating the Test makeup for the Lions. So with that in mind, if you want to get involved in the tour itself, first test on July the 24th. And as Jeremy Guscott said last week, South Africa is the best place he toured. We'll find out from our guest in just a moment if he feels the same. But for those of us in the UK, there is nothing like watching every tour match live. Sky Sports is the place to do it for 18 quid extra per month for non-Sky Sports customers. Live rugby you can't afford to miss. Head to sky.com/sports for more details. Come and get involved. The other thing I quickly wanted to reference as well before we do get to our guest is that there was a lot of news headlines last year about Matt Ratana. Most of you will know the name. He was the head coach at East Grinstead Rugby Club and very, very sadly was tragically killed whilst on duty in his role as a custody sergeant. In his memory, we are really pleased to announce that the inaugural Matt Ratana Rugby Foundation Memorial Day is going to be taking place on this August bank holiday at Hazelwood, which is the home of London Irish in Sunbury-on-Thames, so just outside London. It's not a day to miss if you are a rugby fan, if you support the Blues and Twos. It's an invitational men's and women's team representing the foundation, which will be taking on a side representing the England Police. Normally, whenever England Police are involved, it's quite a lively fixture, I'm told. Yes. Handcuffs post-match. They will be celebrating all things Matt, his love of the game and the great sport that we all love. So if you are around, you're looking for something to do in August, go and check out the Matt Ratana Rugby Foundation Memorial Day at Hazelwood. Get down there if you can. All support, very welcome and very much appreciated.
There's some good players in there as well. I think I'm not going to be able to remember off the top of my head. There's Nathan Hines. Who else has signed up? I've said I'll play. I'm supposed to be on holiday, but if for some reason we can't go on holiday, then I'm going to play. I think it's just a good thing to be involved in, a good thing to support. Good on you.
I didn't realise you were playing in it.
Well, I've said I can't at the moment, but if my holiday plans change, then I will.
Right, available for selection. Should we get into it? Let's do that. We don't really need to introduce him. He's just a founding member of Goat Club. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's a very warm welcome to Mr. Brian O'Driscoll. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. Thanks for having me on.
We're very excited to have you on. What's been keeping you busy? What's on the to-do list at the moment?
I'm just back from 2 weeks away with the family, so that's been keeping me busy.
We saw you on a Shire horse. Were you doing some rising trot? What was happening with that?
My daughter went like pony riding down a beach, and your man was like, do you want to go? I was like, not really. And then I was forced by my family to get up on this thing. And as you could see, it wasn't a natural fit. But yeah, it was I had a little trot, and thankfully, fully intact afterwards. But yeah, it's not my horses kind of scare me, to be honest with you. I know, Tins, you're big into your horses, but they frighten me. I remember a kid when I was 12 or 13, a real horsey kid in my class came back one summer with a massive kind of dent in his arm, and a horse had a proper chew of his arm. That was it for me. I was like, they're not to be trusted. I always thought, don't go near the back of them, but then I found don't go near their mouth either. So
just don't get near
I
them.
I got a bit of a shock actually. I was around some horses the other day. I don't know why. Just middle class life.
But just talking about teeth.
Yeah, I was. I went to the dentist, and the rest of my kind were there. And I went to feed it an apple, and honestly, it tried to take my fingers off. And I remember, I just didn't think they bit you. I know horses they do the whole thing with the mouthing, but this thing was trying to have my fingers off. It was terrifying.
Yeah, I had a racehorse with Highclere, and I had to go do some PR for it. And it's the more sort of racy and ampy they are, that they will nibble you. And this thing, I was having a photo and it bit my nipple as I was having this photo, and I was trying to still smile whilst it literally almost took my nipple off.
There's probably people on the internet that pay quite a lot of money to get their nipple bit by a horse.
But you've got to make sure
that you spit out the mouthful of hair it got with it as well.
Make sure your kids don't fall in love with it, or that house in the countryside will be gone, as it will be going into horses, horse boxes, and everything else. Tricker. That's where you've got to watch it. It'll sneak up.
Well,
on
my
you.
daughter did talk about, I would really love to have a pony. I was like, I know, I'd love to have lots of things, and it's the reality.
Some things just aren't possible.
It's never ever going to happen. No. So she has a friend that has horses up in the kind of Dublin Hills, and she goes up there every so often. So we've got to reduce the number of times she does visit up there, because if it becomes too regular, she might think it's going to happen. It's coming home.
Oh, don't say that. That's raw. That's brutal at this point in the week. How many? You've got a little one as well. How are you getting on with dad life at the moment? Is dad life dominating?
6 months.
Wow.
Like literally, like I said, I have a 2-week holiday. There's no break. I can't wait to get back into doing a little bit of work. It's been so full on. It's great, and he's really good, but it's your mind does play tricks on you. My other two are 8 and 6, so they kind of fend for themselves. I've got a kids camp that's been cancelled this week, so they're home and they're just downstairs watching a bit of telly, and they can fend for themselves. They can get themselves snacks and things. Him, not so much. He's quite needy and exhausting, and there's no pattern to any sleep yet, even though he's 6 months. I remember 7 months being a kind of a watershed of being able to get your life back in some shape or form. This guy isn't playing ball in that regard. It doesn't feel as though anything is coming down the line. So even though he's pretty chilled and mellow, he is somewhat frustrating on that front.
I've got a lady for you. She's called Rachel Waddylove. She's the Mary Poppins on sleeping.
Does she travel to Ireland?
Yeah, I'm sure she will. But she's very good on the phone as well. That's been this actually. Our little fella's is different to the girls, but still, she's magical. I'll send you her number.
Is it like the scene from Meet the Parents, or is it Meet the Fockers, where the baby's crying and Owen Wilson just goes. Baby's head. He goes, it's got a bit of a cranial. Puts it to sleep.
That would be genius.
Because if you could do that, I'd like to do it to my wife, actually. James, where have you been? Chloe's having
what happened? Did you wake up with him like nothing? You just fell asleep. You were
tired little bunny.
Yeah.
Do you oh god, your voice from last night is still a bit croaky. But do you I'm fascinated. Do your parents? How are they comparing you with your kids right now? I mean, when you talk about a little man who's got a lot of energy and is working things out, where do you see yourself in your kids?
I look at my 6-year-old. I see my 6-year-old. He's obviously he's a bit small for his class, and I was exactly the same. But I can see he's got good hand-eye coordination. It's very hard to know whether. There's football, lots of footballing ability. He's decent at football without being outstanding. He's actually insisted on playing a little bit of rugby, even though I was kind of discouraging it for a good few years, but he kind of forced my hand. and he's quick. So that you can see there's certain kind of skills in there somewhere, but it's very hard to see at 6 years of age. My daughter, less interested in kind of team stuff, and a bit like my wife, she doesn't like getting chased. So she kind of gets petrified. And if you make loud noises or run after her, she's horrified. So
your wife or your daughter?
No, they. This is it that sort of pod? Are we going?
It's often down to the guest where we end up.
So I don't know. It's like you're just kind of rolling with it. I don't want to be that dad where I'm forcing their hand one way or another, whatever way they travel, and they'll find their own course. So at the moment, like we're watching the game last night, for instance, and within 10 minutes he's kicking a ball behind the couch and wrecking our heads. He's got small little goals in that he can set up and in that room, and he was doing our heads in because could barely hear the commentary because the ball was just smashing against the couch or against the nets. So I remember that too, though. It's you just want to play. You watch a little bit, get a taste for it. A bit like Wimbledon, everyone has their tennis rackets out on the road and playing against one another. Same with the football. It's short attention span of watching it, but then wanting to play it. So yeah, I guess I do see a little bit of me in them.
I mean, to move it on to you in more detail, it's brilliant to have you on, and there are a lot of things that we can talk about. But sort of you as a youngster, I mean, it happened very quickly for you. You were thrust into the limelight at a very young age. Do you remember the point at which actually you two played against each other a lot, didn't you?
Yeah, we played England Island Schoolboys, didn't we, at Lansdowne Road?
Lansdowne Road,
and then there was that streaker. Remember the streaker that Flats absolutely killed?
Yeah.
Literally, this guy.
There was really loads of them. There was about 10 or 12 of them ran across, right?
Yeah, and then literally Flats picked one out, and poor fella, he was literally peeled off the floor by the stewards. But yeah, that's where it all started. And then I think, were you? When did you get your first cap? Was that? I think you might have been a wee bit earlier than me, or were you the same year?
Yeah, I got it. I played. Yeah, no. You got your first cap against us, did you not?
In 2000. Yeah.
No, I got capped in the summer before that in '99, summer tour. So I played in that World Cup in '99.
Yeah.
But I actually, do you know what? My abiding memory from playing that schools match, there was a dinner afterwards in Lansdowne Road, and I sat beside Andrew Sheridan. And within 15 seconds, we were talking about max bench lifts.
I imagine there were similar numbers, were they?
Yeah, it was. My nose was growing as I was telling him what I was lifting.
But I can imagine as well that sitting next to Andrew Sheridan, he was sort of steering the conversation. Like you go, yeah, it's really interesting. What do you think about this? Like, yeah, well, bench press. And he's so terrifying. Just puts a big lead arm on you. Oh, yeah, no, I really like lifting too, Andrew.
Was he into red wine still then? Had he started his red wine journey?
Not so much then. No, not at that stage. No, but I do remember. I think he was telling me that he was benching 160, and I was like, 60? That's very good. Yeah, well done. He goes, no, 160.
Unbelievable. But when did you get the sort of tap on the shoulder, and someone took you aside and said, "You got everything you need right here to be very, very good if you want to go for it full time"? Do you remember that as sort of on your journey to being where you ended up? Was there a fire lit?
Not really. What do you know what happened? Kind of one of the eureka moments maybe was when myself and Gordon Darcy got brought into a national training camp in '98. So I was a year out of school and kind of out of nowhere, and the idea was bringing in some young guys that maybe were potentially future internationals. And I remember going there and feeling obviously total imposter syndrome and feeling way out of my depth, because these are your heroes when you're a teenager growing up, and then all of a sudden you're training with them, but then the realization that maybe you're not that far off, that you're able to cause them problems, be it in some of the drills that you're doing, maybe physically not being able to compete to the same degree, but from a footwork and an ability to beat them one-on-one, maybe even some skill set to a certain degree. So I came away from that thinking, wow, maybe I'm actually not as far away as I thought. And I think that's it's that's the hardest part often, is when you get in there and you think, I do not belong in this environment. And then something triggers where you go, okay, I can survive. I'm with them, and I'm getting a little bit of respect and a little bit of credibility. And then it's about taking your opportunity after that when it does arise, which mine came the following summer.
I've always actually been interested, Brian. You may have answered this before, but just talking about your boy and sort of not forcing him to play rugby and not being sure where he's going to go. Did you always want to be a rugby player? Was that something that you always wanted to do and had a passion to be, or was it just something that you took up and happened to be good at?
Yeah, so I didn't play any rugby until I was 12. I was all Gaelic football in the part of Dublin that I grew up in, and soccer. So I suppose I didn't know an awful lot about rugby. My dad played for Ireland twice in uncapped games in 1970 against Argentina. So obviously there was a bit of rugby pedigree there. I've got my uncle John. He's technically a second cousin, but he feels like an uncle. John played for the Lions. Barry, likewise, my uncle Barry played for Ireland too. So there is pedigree there. My granddad played for Munster back in the 50s, I think it was. So I guess my folks felt as though it was a matter of time to before I tried rugby out, and when they sent me to Blackrock College, that's when it happened. So before that, it was really just being having fun with my pals, playing Gaelic football and soccer. And I was a pretty good soccer player, and I'd been scouted once or twice. We played some kind of underage community games in our locality, and there'd been some scouts there, and I was brought up to kind of higher division teams. And probably just before the trials over in the UK happened, I went and moved school and took up rugby, and football kind of fell by the wayside.
Did you feel pressured into playing football, obviously, with your uncle and your dad? And or do you think you'd have gone down a different path, maybe Gaelic football, if you hadn't have gone to Blackrock? Or do you think sending you to Blackrock was basically to get you into rugby?
No, I don't think my dad wasn't pushing me into it. If I didn't like rugby, which I didn't initially, I was, because I was so small, I was afraid of my own shadow. I was quite nervous. As an early teenager, physically not able to compete with those a year ahead of me in particular. What used to happen, I was on if I made it onto the A team, we'd play against the B team of the year older, and even a year under 14s versus under 13s was substantial, particularly if you're one of the smallest in your year. So I remember being really afraid of tackling and probably running fast because I didn't want to get hit by some of these bigger units too. So it wasn't really until I kind of grew as a 16, 17-year-old, and my confidence came with it. And then the realization that if I hit someone, I could hurt them and make a difference. And those sort of things feed off one another. When you stand over someone, when you've hit them hard and they're not able to get up and you're fine, you kind of go, okay, that felt pretty good. Let me see if I can go again on that. Maybe that was an anomaly or one-off, and then it's not, and you go, okay, and it just spirals then in a positive way. So that took an awful long time. I didn't make under 15s is a big age group in Ireland. Like we'd have thousands of people coming to our games. It's called the Junior Cup. I was on the bench for my school team. I played sub-scrum half behind an international that would have played against you that day, Tins, in Lansdowne Road, a guy called Kieran Scally, who's a good mate of mine, who got 4 caps for Ireland. So it was a slow burner, but then when I did get to 17, 18 and started making representative levels, it happened so quickly then to being a fully fledged international.
And were you comfortable with the speed at which it happened, or did you find yourself at times thinking, holy Moses, this is out of control?
I didn't really have to think about it. It was the great thing. It wasn't like it was this real progression. It was, from that camp in 98 to then I played Ireland under 20s. I think we might have played in that as well, Tins.
Yeah, we were rubbish.
In Dublin. We beat you that year, and then we lost to Wales in a Grand Slam game. And I remember, do you know what? I remember getting Shepherd's Crook. I got with about 15 minutes to go in that game against Wales. I hadn't had a great game, and then I thought, oh wow, I'm going to get dropped for the next game. But instead of that, I was elevated to sit on the bench for an Ireland Senior Six Nations game against Italy, the first one where Italy were part of the Six Nations. I didn't come on in that game, but got the win bonus, which was very important.
Always handy at that time.
And then I got captain in the summer. So it really happened that there were other people. Like I kind of got catapulted ahead of Shane Horgan. Would have been an obvious guy that was playing kind of higher representative than me. He was playing Ireland A before I ever did. I think I skipped Ireland A. I just went from under 20s to full international. Whereas, it was a bit of a surprise. Like, why is this guy being selected on the summer tour? And then I got picked to play 2 tests against Australia, and that was really the end of it. So it all happened so quickly that I didn't really have too much time to dwell or kind of ponder what might be.
I know you said, obviously, you hadn't had the time to ponder, and perhaps the more physical you got, the more you kind of removed away from those fears. But did any of that concern about kind of size and physicality follow you forward? Because I know in my own particular journey, I was always quite a big guy, but I was never that keen on tackling, and I remember there was kind of this watershed moment before I signed my first contract with Wasp. My old man took me to one side and was like, listen, you and I both know you don't like tackling. You're a bit of a fanny. You're always going upper body. You need to learn to tackle. And I spent my entire kind of first 8 years working with Joe Worsley. And I wondered with you, because when I was lucky enough to play against you a number of times, you were always very physical, always very aggressive, always a massive competitor. But I wondered whether some of that stuff stayed with you, or was it just something you completely grew out, or did you have to keep working on it?
I remember a really big moment when I played Ireland under 19s against Leinster under 20s, and there was a centre that was that had played representative that I was playing opposite. He played for Ireland schools, and he was touted to be a potential future Ireland centre. And I remember hitting him once and like fully committing to it, and I smashed him, and it didn't hurt me. And I remember looking back after he got himself up, and I saw him limping off, and I just got such an incredible thrill from it. He was a much bigger guy than me, and I just thought I've really hurt him, and I didn't hurt myself. So if you're able to do that against bigger guys, again, why can't it be a more regular thing? And my confidence just grew with that. I also, it's a little bit of the chip on the shoulder where there isn't the expectation of you as a smaller player having that physical side. Also, low center of gravity, so that evolution of back row and centers becoming back rowers and trying to steal ball and become good jacklers. I realized that I had good capabilities in that space, and it was something that I really worked on. And I didn't want to be seen as someone that just liked the ball, liked it with ball in hand going forward. That I wanted to be seen on both sides of the ball, defensively, not shirking my responsibilities. So that kind of grew the more confidence I got physically as well. And I think that probably was the biggest grower over the course of my career of evolving. As I lost a yard of speed, that I became better from a defensive point of view of understanding systems, understanding when to shoot, understanding when to dummy shoot, and trying to get into the heads of the opposition and making them guess what you were going to do next, but then also trying to be a proficient tackler as well.
You're quite a pioneer of that, actually. I remember obviously doing analysis of you and Gordon Darcy, and I think everybody who listens to this podcast and knows about your career, there are those highlight moments. But so many players who could do that didn't have the other dimension. And I remember always, whenever we played Ireland, talking about your ability to tackle and jackal. And if Gordon Darcy chopped you around the ankles, you were going to come and take the ball, or vice versa. And it was such a threat, and it kind of pioneered the way that most centres go now. Because the old adage was, the back row have to steal. Now, and then it suddenly becomes centres, then it became wingers, and now props are in on the act. Some of the biggest turnover people are props. They get the big dumper over the ruck, and you can't get them off it.
Yeah.
Also, if you think about the rules back in those days as well, like there was no tackle release. You know, it was like you could be the assist tackler and you were in and pilfering ball. You could get up from there was no coming through the gate. So if you were willing to get up off the ground quickly, you could steal ball pretty effectively. And myself and Dart, discovered a pretty good telepathy of understanding when, from a body shape perspective, when I had total comfort in him making chop tackles and seeing the angle of the player falling or seeing where the support runners were. I knew when I had a great opportunity to go and steal ball, or where they were fully stacked with their support, I just leave it off till next time. So that only comes from training together and playing together at club level and then subsequently internationally.
Very interesting. I just very quickly wanted to ask you, you referenced the fact that when you came into the Ireland setup, you adjusted quite quickly. Did you adjust faster to off the field? Because when you came in, there were some proper old Irish warlords like Galway and Wood and Hayes, etc. Was it as easy off the field as it was on it?
Well, you're a product of your environment, aren't you? It took a long time for the penny to drop in Ireland, certainly in our club setup and internationally, to understand what true professionalism was. Just to remember that these guys came from an amateur era. They all of a sudden didn't have to work anymore, but they were being paid. But it's very difficult to flick a switch to understand what the expectation is of you. So in many ways, I don't think until all of those players that had played some amateur through into professionalism, until they retired, I don't think we could properly change as both internationally and at a club level. I think the penny dropped maybe down in Munster a little bit before it did with us in Leinster, but we had some great times though. Geez, we had some good days, and I do look back on our time, and it does feel as though we got the best of both worlds, because we didn't leave it behind. We didn't win a World Cup like Tins and the English boys, but we had some insane nights in the early 2000s.
But didn't you almost, from what I hear, Brian, didn't you almost become like a perfect hybrid of that old school mentality? I speak to some of your teammates and counterparts and stuff, and that they always said super dedicated professional, but always a person for a good time, always controlled that kind of emotional energy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Like I loved a good night. We used to play down in Leinster. We used to play on Friday nights in Donnybrook, and this was the days when there'd be 2,500 people. You look at they can fill the Aviva sometimes with Leinster games, and big games you could fill it a couple of times over. But this was really in the infancy of the province developing. But we played Friday nights, and the race to get off the pitch was almost as impressive as some of the speed shown on it. To get in, get changed, and get down to a pub called Kiley's, which was like 50 yards down the road from it, because there was a night of free pints from Pat Kiley in there ahead of us. And then all our mates would come in. Then you'd be, obviously the Saturday, maybe a recovery, go and, do a swim or something. And then you'd be out with your mates that night into town. And, good few pints and whatnot, having a laugh and enjoying, their company and enjoying being a professional rugby player. And, I suppose some of the kudos that came with that. And then Sunday, we'd have Sunday off again and be like, oh God, we're going to have a couple of settlers. Couldn't go in on Monday feeling like this.
Always need the settlers, bring the emotion.
So but then we, in the early 2000s, we used to have a Monday night club. And we'd go out for like really nice dinners in good restaurants, and then try and find a club to go to. And it could be 2 or 3 in the morning, and then coming in for 8 or 9 on the Tuesday morning, trying to avoid any coach, trying to avoid the strength and conditioning coach, and just trying to get through it. So like you could have a triple header or 4 nights on the bounce, and there we were wondering, we just can't quite win the silverware. I don't know what our stumbling block is. And then eventually it kind of dawned on us, we probably need to make a few sacrifices here.
Just a couple of nights.
Need to
just a couple of nights. Bin the Settlers on a Sunday.
Just take one. Exactly. Take the Settlers away. Monday night is too good a night to give up. Take the Settlers away. They're the ones that are causing us, the hiccups in the last 5 minutes of those championship games.
I've got to ask the question because you two obviously have spoken in depth about 2011, and there was obviously a lot made of that Rugby World Cup. I've just got to ask you, Brian, did you enjoy the 2011 Rugby World Cup?
Did you enjoy the Thursday before our Thursday? Because apparently you did.
Bring the press on board for a night out. Buy them some early pints the night that you're out, and they'll be pretty cool. Now it's a different world that we obviously exist in with regard to the Irish press and around big tournaments, and obviously the fact that there was royalty or future royalty in the English camp. It was going to bring a heightened expectation and anticipation and scrutiny as well. But we had a good night in Queenstown, whatever it was, 3 or 4 days before you guys had yours. But we were experienced at keeping our heads down at vital times. You not so much so. So yeah,
Right,
it's all those early years of building up a knowledge and know-how on the piss that served us well when it came to the really important tournaments.
Because listen, you don't have to answer this, but I because we obviously had this story when we were out there, obviously on what was dubbed Tins's Stag Do, but I can assure you it was actually a World Cup. We while we were out there, obviously, every time it was in the papers, it was England players on the smash. When the Welsh boys went quad biking, one of the most dangerous activity. It was wonderful Welsh boys letting their hair down. We went bungee jumping. Idiot English players.
You know how easy it is to get injured.
Yeah, but then when I heard about there was obviously this Irish night that you talked about in Queenstown. Is it true that the night went on that somebody got carried home? They then shut the bar for a little bit for a clean up, and then had to pay the band to stay later, and then they reopened again, and the Irish boys absolutely completed alcohol in Queenstown, and then and there was press there, and everyone just sort of dissipated, and none of them was the wiser, because I've heard about it, but I just never got the full SP on what was going on.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what went on after 11 p.m. that evening.
Snitches get stitches.
One thing I do know is I got back to the team hotel, right? I wasn't fully aware of this, so all I could see was darkness. And I was like, oh God. Well, hang on. So, well, I'll tell you now. I was like, I got back and and I was like, I'm not entirely sure where I am here. So I rang my missus, who was obviously in the other side of the world, and I said, listen, I'm lost in Queenstown. She's like, what am I going to do for you? I God Almighty. Hang on a second. I'll see if I can contact Shaggy and see if he can pick you up. So Shaggy's Shane Horgan. So she rings Shane Horgan and she goes, Shaggy, Brian's lost in Queenstown. Have you any idea where he is? And he goes, oh, I haven't been picked for that World Cup squad. I'm in Ireland. So she's like, oh my God. So she's gone and rang one of my mates that actually hasn't been selected. Salt into wounds. So anyway, then she goes and rings Gordon Darcy. Darcy's been in bed like 4 hours before me. So anyway, she goes, you're going to have to find your own way. Anyway, I kind of rummage around on some walls and I realize that I'm on the floor of the team room, but it's just fully pitch black outside, so or inside. So I was like, well, I was home. I made my way home. The radar was working.
The radar was working.
I just couldn't quite get to the bedroom. So I remember my dad going to me the next day going, you can't bring in your wife to say you're lost on the other side of the world. You're 30 years of age. Like, fair point.
What is it? I don't think I've ever had the privilege of having a proper night out. What is it? Are you disorientated when having a few alcohols? Because we all got those members of the team that have a few beers and turn into an alter ego. Like we had a guy that was called James, and he turned into a bloke called Hank. We had someone else that turned into Frank. Do you have is that your kind of side, or are you just a bit of a bumbly, cheery kind of guy, or are you a bit of a nightmare?
Bit of crowd surfing.
Yeah.
No, I had. It's funny, I'm scared of my life of hangovers now, and I know I genuinely know my number. It occasionally slips, maybe once or twice a year, but I get them so bad. I get so badly feared up that it does feel as though I have the T-shirt from my 20s and 30s that I just don't want to relive it. But what sort of guy am I? The lads would say that. People, I would have kind of given them the stare through them. The old Brian,
the dead eyes
over here. Literally, yeah, right through them. But no, not aggro. Kind of pretty jovial, but apparently forgetful.
Yeah, it's not good to forget, actually, by the way. That doesn't help you either.
I try to forget, and I always wake up with absolute demons.
It's interesting you mentioned your 20s and your 30s. I was going to go to sort of your early 20s. I think I was going to call it your sort of Leonardo DiCaprio Gangs of New York type phase. There was a lot of long, fairly blonde, fairly greasy hair. There was a lot of fuzz going on the bottom lip as well. I can remember, I'm not sure you would, but I can remember doing a game with you. It was Leinster-Bourgoin. This was a long time ago, about 2004. And you scored 2 absolute worldies. I think one of them actually was fairly similar to the one you scored at the Gabba. And I remember interviewing you afterwards, and I don't know whether this was just you, fanning the flames of what was to become a great legend, but you gave an answer that I've never forgotten, which is that you said there are times in a game where you sort of enter the matrix and you can kind of just sort of see what's going to happen before it happens. And I sort of wanted to pick that up with you now. I mean, were there times as a player where you just had everything where you wanted it and you kind of just entered a slightly sort of different zone? It certainly looked the way that you played that you could sometimes just enter the zone.
I definitely didn't say Matrix.
No, I don't think you didn't say into the Matrix. But you said
don't paraphrase. Yeah. Don't paraphrase what I said. I said it just unfolded. Do you know what? I remember that. I remember that try. But do you know what? There's other occasions that I thought that I was going to make a difference in a game, and I didn't. We got beaten by Argentina in the '99 World Cup, and we needed a try late in the game, and I thought, it's grand. I'm going to get one here. I'll be able to sort us out, and I'll try and be Roy the Rovers, and it didn't materialize. But sometimes you do feel on it. You do feel as though I did feel over the course of my career that you just had an extra edge, and not like I'm not saying every other week, but 5 or 6 times over the course of my career, it just felt as though you were super sharp. I remember playing a game in Bath in 2006, just after I'd come back from my shoulder injury. It just felt as though you were a step of ahead of the game. And Paris, when I scored my hat trick in 2000, was another day where you just feel fleet of foot. You just feel sharper than everyone. Just feels as though you're able to see it a fraction earlier. But that's not to say that happened every time you went out. And there's moments that you have that clarity and you feel as though you can see the picture unfolding, and that if you can be one step ahead of it, well, that's where you'll get your scores. And Bourgoin was probably one of those moments.
I was going to say, there's no one who's made the loose-fitting cotton traders shirts look better when you're stepping through and it's just dragging behind you than Brian. It's just I was thinking, who else has made it work so well where
and he was
you're running along and this thing's dragging behind you. All someone needs to do is jump on the back of it, but they can't get hold of it.
And he was the pioneer of the fingerless gloves as well.
Oh, yeah. That was
2004. Died lid thing, fingerless gloves, like,
yeah. Very bionic. Have you ever revealed what the diamond was for?
What the
was it diamond or score?
It was yeah. So I did. I have revealed it. So this is proper throwback to the times that we were living in back then. So anyone that's been out in Dublin knows a place called Leeson Street, right? It's the last port of call before home, right? It's only wine bars down there. So anyway, the week before the French game, I'm down in Leeson Street because back in those days there used to be Six Nations every 2 weeks, not week on week, or not getting back-to-back games. So the Saturday night beforehand, I was in Buck Whaley's, as it was, looking for their cheapest bottle of wine, and I met one of my sister's friends called Oren, and he goes, next time you score a try for Ireland, you've got to give me the big O. And I was like, yeah, sure, another glass of wine. So anyway, trigger forward to scoring the first try that day. And literally as I dotted it down, it was the first thing that I thought of. So you see, I don't black out every night I go out, right? I remember that. I remember that specifically, and I thought, Big O. I said I'd give him a shout out, so I did it, and then I scored a second one in the second half, and did it again, and then by the time I scored the third one, I thought this is getting too serious for any more of that messing. Just get back to halfway line and try and get your breath.
Unbelievable. But you held on to that for years. Am I right to say you didn't tell that story for a long old time? Was that the mystique?
I don't know why. I think it was. Yeah,
was it because you couldn't remember the story then, and now you remembered it later on? You're like, I don't know why I do it, but I do it.
At a moment of lucidity in my 30s. Yeah. I just liked. I don't know. I think I liked the mystique of it, and I don't know why I held on to it. Why I held on to it. It was kind of our little thing. I think I kind of liked the fact that Oren was saying it to all his mates, and I was kind of denying it. So I think I pissed him off as well. So I was just trying to wind him up. Going, no, it was nothing to do with you, Oren. What? You just said it was.
I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious you've got to get back to Daddy Daycare quite soon as well. So Lions, are you watching? Are you loving? Are you a little bit overwhelmed by what they've done so far? Where are you at with 2021?
No, like on the. I don't think you can be underwhelmed with what. Sorry, I haven't seen the second Sharks game from the weekend yet. I've obviously seen the final score, but I'm not underwhelmed with the way they've played. I've been a bit underwhelmed with some of the opposition.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
You have to remember too. You know, they're a team that have just been put together, so trying to be overcritical in the first couple of games is pretty tough. They were decent against Japan without being exceptional. The Lions game, I thought they were pretty solid. You starting to get a clear idea of what way they want to play. They're pushing the pass, which is great. Looking at playing an offloading game, which is going to be vitally important to scoring tries against this South African team, and that smothering defense. So they're definitely going about building a game plan that's going to cause problems for the South Africans in the Test series if we do ever get there. But I'm a bit like everybody else. I feel for the players and the management because they're playing on a tour that doesn't add up, that feels kind of in many ways morally a little bit wrong with what's going on in the country. It feels like I know that it's a business and the Lions is, the business of sport. It's always a money play, but it's usually wrapped up in a sea of red, the supporter base, community, and there's none of that this year. So it almost looks a bit bold and apparent and vulgar that it's 100% a money play, and it's a little bit more difficult to stomach that from a supporter's perspective because of what's going on in South Africa and the struggles they're having with COVID. So, and also, from a player perspective, that this isn't the Lions tour as it should be. They're meant to be able to go out and enjoy their day offs and go for coffees and see supporters from England, Scotland, Wales, supporting them as Irish players. There's none of that. They're other than on social media and what they're hearing from home. To be in those bubbles, I have to say I don't envy them because it feels like a massively watered down version of what the Lions really is.
Fingers crossed. We'll get to a test series, as you say, and fingers crossed it is meaty and sort of leaves the right impression. But with everything you achieved in the game, where does the Lions sit? I mean, does it feel like yesterday you were running around in red? Does it feel like a lifetime ago?
It's funny, I don't miss rugby that much anymore. Like maybe the biggest international games. But I still have pangs when I watch the Lions because it's such an unbelievable time. To get to play with a caliber and quality of player on a daily basis, to hang out with guys that you've got this huge respect for, and for them to be your teammates and to throw down any kind of adversarial feelings that you have for one another, and you build this bond and unity over a 6 or 7 week period is so bananas, but so brilliant. So I do look on Lions tours. I thought it would go after the last one because that was the first Lions tour since I retired. But I have to say, this time round, even though I still feel for them and what they're having to do, there's something really magical about the Lions. I remember it being the pinnacle of my playing days. And even though I've pretty mixed memories in my tours, some huge disappointment with injury and non-selection, I still have overriding great memories from the tours more than anything.
I still think that I think our era, myself, yourself, Hask, that 97 sort of living with the Lions and how they portrayed that really got a massive buy-in from our generation. Was that the same for you in terms of how you approach Lions and looking forward to going on tour with them?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously it comes to the winning of the series. You know, it's all well and good having a great time and having a laugh, but it's ultimately about, you know, playing good rugby and being competitive. And I think, you know, certainly in 2001, when, you know, I remember watching that tour, doing my final exams in school with all of my pals, and you know, if someone had said to me that you're going to be playing in the test series on the next tour, you know, I would have laughed at them. But then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're playing with Martin Johnson and Lawrence Delalio and Johnny Wilkinson, who'd broken onto the scene, you know, really quickly after school. You're definitely pinching yourself, and that's why you wanted to go on longer than 7 weeks, because you know you're playing at a level that you don't get internationally. Maybe in some countries, you know, and even in the, you know, even the standard of and the number of players in England, it's a significantly improved standard across the board than anything I think anyone will play again, because everyone is on their game. I remember going to Lions training and being nervous at the prospect of being made look silly. You have to be so sharp. And it's funny, there was very few beers before Lions training sessions because you just had to be on it. I remember in 2001, Phil Larder was the defensive coach and we were doing one-on-one drills, and I counted down the line as to who my opponent was, and I see Jason Robinson. I'm like, oh shit. And we're literally in a 5 meter channel, and anyway, it's one-on-one, full bore. And so Robbo comes charging at me, and I go, all right, here we go. And I hit him and I smash him. And Phil Larder stands and goes, you see, one of the best attackers in the world, that's how you put him to the ground. And I turned around to the line. I was like, well, it was a 50% chance of getting it right, wasn't it? Literally, it was like, I've got to pick one side. I hope he runs into that side. And that's what it felt like with him. He was a freak.
How many?
Like saving a penalty, just pick one way and commit to it, isn't it?
Heads or tails. How many times have you told the story of that try?
I think other than maybe lifting, I think you remember lifting trophies. So they're kind of more standout moments than, I know it's a playing moment, maybe. I think because of the quality of the opposition, because you're so naive to it, the realization of how big a moment like that might be. You know, I remember specifically, I do remember it like it was yesterday, because I could see that they were a bit disorganized in midfield. Johnny likes to call quite a lot of phase play as well as set piece play from 10. So, you know, you have to be very dominant with him when you do want the ball. And I specifically remember going, I want to have a go here. They're disorganized in midfield. I could see a couple of bigger units in there. Nathan Gray was struggling to get back into the defensive line. So I just wanted the ball in my hands. I felt like I could make a half break and get an offload. Got through the first challenge and then looked around to see where the support was. I saw Danny Grucock was the only one on the outside. Thought, oh, okay, I might have to carry it for another few meters. And then Matt Burke came charging in, and I genuinely thought I better get out of his way. He's going to kill me, the speed he's coming at me. And I sidestepped and he didn't get a hand on me. And I realized my momentum wasn't stalled and I was able to pick up again. And then you're running scared then. I was like, it feels like a hot potato. You want to get rid of the ball. It's like, someone take this off me. I've dragged every last sinew out of this run. And then I managed to get to the line just before Joe Roth comes across. And I think you realize it's a good try, but maybe you don't realize the impact that it might have on people kind of watching at home, and how it's, it was 20 years old last week, and how it gets regurgitated, and the comments that come with it on social media. It is nice to be part of a great moment, but a great game, but ultimately that was the series that got away from us.
It's so funny that just talking about you watching it in '97. I remember in my senior common room at Wellington, rushing off to watch that 2001 and seeing you do that, seeing you score that try, and just being like kind of blown away by it. It was like, we obviously knew who you were, but kind of the iconic moment, then going out and playing touch outside and everyone trying to pretend to do it and everything else. It's amazing what an effect it had, because it was so memorable and so amazing. I want to just ask you one quick. I know you talked about the try. If you say that your mind goes back to the Lions, is there a particular person on the different tours, or a particular moment from more of the social side that really sticks in your mind? Like, I think back to New Zealand, and like you said, going for coffees and actually getting to sit down with a Johnny Sexton, a Sean O'Brien, a Dan Bigger, some of these guys I never would have, had the chance to have an intimate conversation with, sitting for coffees and laughing hysterically, and then going off to training or sitting on the back of the bus. These are the moments that I think of in that Lions tour. And obviously the games and stuff were amazing, but those are the moments. Do you have something like that always makes you smile in the back of your mind?
Yeah, there's a few of them. You've got preconceived notions about what certain people are like, and you build up these adversaries, and then you don't get to spend an awful lot of time with them, be it playing for club or country. And I remember rooming in 2009 with Mike Phillips and thinking, oh, Jesus, I've got 3 days with him. Right, it'll be over quickly. I'll just spend most of my time out of the room. It'll be fine. And going into the room, and within 30 seconds, he was asking me, so do you know Bono? I was like, oh my God, here we go. So I was like, maybe I'll just lay it on thick. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm over for Sunday lunch quite regularly. And he's lapping it up. So I think he'd just broken up with the singer Duffy at the time. So he's gone through his big celeb phase at that time. But I remember being completely turned by him over the course of 3 days, and having a laugh with him. And Philsy plays the role, a bit confident, a bit arrogant, but it comes from a really funny place. And yes, he does believe it a small bit, but he's kind of taking the piss at the same time. And when you get to know people, not the players, but the people, I think you get to enjoy them so much more. And what happens there as well is then you get plugged into his mates, into Lee Byrne and into Shane Williams, and you spend more time with them. And I think that's how the integration of Lions happens. That's why you don't room with your fellow countrymen. You got to room with people from other countries that you don't know, because their connectivity to their fellow countrymen becomes yours. And then you all of a sudden, for those 3 days, have one friend to look out for, making sure you're wearing the right clothes, you're at the right training sessions, right time, and so on. And then you go and have those coffees with those individuals that maybe you wouldn't have had a chance to do so. So that really stuck out. Another time that kind of sticks out, and go back to the social side of it. In 2013, we won the Magnus League, I think it was. And so we didn't have the week's training before we traveled to Hong Kong. So we arrived in on the Sunday, flew straight away. So there'd already been kind of a togetherness of the squad. And we went out for a few drinks in Hong Kong. And I was like, I didn't drink before training at that stage. I was like 33, 34 years of age. I just couldn't do it. Anyway, I said, God, I better get into this and have a few. The next thing I remember I'm in a headlock with Manu Tuilagi in the back of a taxi in the early hours of Hong Kong. Not a smart play. And I remember waking up the next morning and looking at the bed I'm in. I was like, I don't remember being in this bed, or deciding that this was my bed. I look across and Lee Halfpenny is in my bed. I was like, what's going on there? He goes, yeah, you got into my bed after you locked yourself out of the room trying to go to the toilet, and I let you back in. Then you tried to get back into my bed, so I had to sleep in yours. So, and the feeling of training the next day, we trained at midday. It was torture, absolute torture. But it's really important that sometimes there's a throwback to the amateur era around that you do integrate yourself, and there's no better way than doing it over a few beers and having laughs, because it's what carries you then for the rest of the tour. And it doesn't always have to be, people that are non-drinkers, you can go out and still have a laugh with your teammates, but it's about spending quality time with one another, relaxing and kind of giving a little bit of yourself. And that's what carries you through.
I wanted to ask you about the infamous session with Austin Healey in 2001. And given how much you work with him now, do you ever just
put the gloves back on?
Pop the gloves back on, just get a little feint and a shake in the car park before a game or not?
The beauty with that is that it's the one thing that really tortures Austin. That, he continues to deny it 20 years later, but he knows the truth.
And the truth is,
and the truth is I think everyone in the world knows the story. Anyone that's listened to any podcast knows at this stage. Basically, Rog had the head punched off him against New South Wales, and within a day or two, we had boxing gloves lying around the place, and Austin went over and got a glove on, and he kind of went and nudged Rog and said, "Is it too soon? Is it too soon?" And it was still pretty raw with Rog. And he goes, do you want to go? Do you want to fight? And I saw that, and Rog would have been a good pal of mine, and I said, I'll have a go. So I went over and got a set of gloves myself. And the funny thing was, the biggest excitement of the whole group was the English players at the prospect of Austin having the head digged off him. And so they made like a makeshift ring. And I don't know what happened, but it was kind of like an inner Manny Pacquiao came out, and I just started landing combinations on Austin. And I must have landed 20 punches without him being able to do anything. And the more frustrated he got, the more he left himself open, and he started hitting body shots and then combination hooks. And then I realized too, I got to get out of this before he actually lands one, because Austin's, he's got an edge to him as well. And I thought it was only a matter of time. And I was like, listen, Austin, you've got a game on Wednesday. I can't have you going out looking like Rog now. So I got to leave it be. So we're done here. And then I remember someone had thrown the white towel in, found a towel in the corner and threw it in. And it was
Did you have Martin Johnson cornering you, getting you to spit in a bucket, like massaging your shoulders?
Austin's one of those people that if his wife was there, she would have been massaging me in the corner, trying to get me ready for it. But yeah, it's a thing that on social media, the amount over the last 15 years, the amount of people that have made reference to it and tagged him in, or he said something and something controversial, and then someone will come in and go, I'm not surprised Brian O'Driscoll digged the head off you. And like, it's constant denial from him. It's such a beautiful thing. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh man, I'm not sure he'll ever get a right to reply on this show. Go on, Tids.
No, I was going to just ask, obviously, you and Darcy made up possibly one of the best partnerships. Myself and Will had our bit. Looking at, were you surprised by the centres that he's taken on this tour, and then who do you think is going to make that ideal partnership? Because I think it's still one of the biggest questions on this Lions trip is who's going to be that centre partnership.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a pity around the creativity. I definitely would have had Henry Slade or Gary Ringrose, probably on the balance of things. Probably would have picked Henry Slade, a left foot as well, really good kicker as well. Kicking game's going to be important. Creative, but also give you advantage line. He's Gats' sort of player as well, which I'm surprised about. He can carry. He's a big unit, and Gats likes those powerful ball carriers. So I thought they missed a trick there. Chris Harris hasn't done anything wrong, but I do feel as though Henry Slade or Gary Ringrose just have an ability to create something for the exciting outside backs that do exist in that Lion setup. So for me, the test team, I think Owen Farrell has to be in the test team. Just having played with him in 2013, understand the mentality, watched him. Just even seeing in the first Sharks game, his ability to pull the pass late, to create. I think you've got to have one of those in the centre to bring in the likes of Watson or Adams or Hogg or whoever's going to be playing in that back three. I just feel as though if we're going to play confrontational, we'll come off second best. So I do feel that Owen Farrell will be starting at 12. I think you'll have Dan Biggar at 10, and then I think Robbie Henshaw is the obvious choice at 13. I think the best defensive player in Britain and Ireland, not only as a tackler but also as a defensive reader, to have the combination of both. I think Tins was always a brilliant tackler and a good reader. I think Robbie brings the reading ability of understanding front door and back door at the same time to another level. He's developed phenomenally over the last 4 or 5 years, as comfortable at 12 and 13. So I'd love to see the combination of Farrell and Henshaw, because they're both big physical players. Robbie will give you the advantage line, but is also a proficient tackler. I just think there's a nice balance to be struck between those two.
Brilliant. Time's up almost. What's going to happen? Fingers crossed we get a test series. What's going to happen?
I was less positive 10 days ago, but the more I watch of the Lions, the more, and now hearing what's going on in South Africa, they're going to be massively undercooked, not getting a second game against Georgia, with all of those. I don't know if it's confirmed cases of COVID within their camp. I just feel as though it's starting to swing the Lions' way. The only issue is what the mental health and mental state of the Lions players will be, whether they're in that positive mindset, because you have to feel good to play well, and if they're not having a good time, I think it'll be very difficult to translate that onto the park, even though they've been pretty impressive so far. So I thought before, 10 days ago, and I was on a call, I thought might be South Africa 2-1. I'm starting to sway towards maybe Lions 2-1. Again, it's all about that all-important first test. I don't think there's anything to be afraid of with this South African team, and particularly the fact that they haven't had any rugby really in the last 20 months at this level. I think that will stand to our players.
So, do you think it's going to help? Obviously, we've played at altitude these first few games, and then we're dropped into Cape Town, and now all the tests are going to be in Cape Town. That, as you said, we're going to be actually flying out the gates rather than the South Africans are going to be playing a little bit of catch up. So that first test is really a place where the Lions can lay down a marker. Yeah,
it is, and I think we got caught. I don't know why we got caught 12 years ago with the physicality. And Gats was assistant coach in that. I think they'll be prepared for that. That they will know that is what's coming, and that's what won South Africa the World Cup. But I do feel as though there's greater creativity in this Lions team than there is in the South African team. They've an impressive kicking game. But I do feel they'll need more than their kicking game and the physicality that they've shown in 2019, because it's England plus, the best of the other teams. And even though England were well beaten that day, I think they learned a huge amount from it. You're going to have to get your scrum right. And I think the scrum selection, who plays in the front row, is going to be pivotal. You've got to get your set piece right. You've got to win your line-out ball. You've got to win your scrum ball, and you've got to contest it on their scrum ball. So if you can get that right, I do feel as though the phase play of what we've seen with the ball handling of some of the forwards has been pretty exciting. And then when you've got, a number of players, Farrell, Biggar, Russell if he's fit, Marcus Smith if he comes in, there's lots of excitement there and lots of firepower in the wing. So does feel as though there's nothing to be afraid. It'll be close one way or another. There's not going to be any landslide. There'll be no 3-0 victory here for me. It'll be 2-1 one way or the other. And I just feel as though it's starting to edge towards a potential Lions series win.
Fingers crossed. There are so many things we haven't had time to talk to you about, which I would love to. We haven't even discussed golf with Tiger and Rory. I mean, that was extraordinary itself. But Bono, Leinster, Grand Slams, etc.
It's quite good though that we haven't discussed that because Brian Holded his putt, didn't he? Of course you did. Of course you fucking did.
Do you want a quick word on that? Outplaying Tiger Woods.
Do you know what? I'm just glad Rory didn't have the 20-footer back. Did you see the speed that putt went into the hole? I think they damaged I damaged the back of the hole, but it was funny. I was standing over it, right, and I just wanted to get it over and done with really quickly. And I thought, I've got one of the best golfers in the world. I should probably get a line from him. and he told me to hit it 3 balls further left than I was going to. I was like, okay. And for the first time in my life, I actually hit it exactly where I wanted to and where he had told me, and into the middle of the hole. So yeah, trust me, I looked like the golfer that I certainly am not.
Take it, enjoy it, and celebrate it. What I love is the fact that we've spent an hour celebrating, as we said, one of the founding members of Goat Club, and the rest of the day is going to be spent doing what? Back into dad pants?
I'm going to go and pick the dog up from my mother's, and I'm going to have my kids. I'm going to try and stave them off asking for incessant food and treats, a bit like every other parent during lockdown. So, and then I'm going to try and do a little bit of work in the afternoon when my wife is done with her stuff. So yeah, there's lots of dovetailing going on with this cancel camp today. Thanks, Star Camps.
What a plug. Yeah. And on that bombshell, Brian, it's been an absolute privilege. Thank you so much. Look after yourself. We'd love to do another show sometime soon. Good luck with all the childcare in the meantime. Good on you. Thank you very much indeed.
Good to chat, guys. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Brian, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to chat. We'll hopefully have another episode with you before too long. Good luck with the daddy daycare. And as he heads off, what more can you say, really? Class.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, I think his resume speaks for itself. Obviously, it is weird. We had a very, very similar journey. Well, obviously his then went stratospheric, and I'm sometimes, if I look back now and I get a time machine, I'm going back and telling him Gaelic football is definitely his way to go, because I think it would open up far more doors for me, read Lions and other things. But I just, he's the strongest thing you could ever say about him is his development. The way that he just had that ability, that low center of gravity. I always say he was never really my man, even though we were directly opposite, because he was always the 2 people in. So it wasn't even necessarily Will's man. It would be the guard or the bodyguard who's come around the corner, because he'll step back in there and he'll, as he said, he searches for the people in the wrong place at the wrong time, the fatties, the ones that don't really want someone who's got feet and gas coming anywhere near them. But yeah, he has some of the best highlight moments in rugby, and the most annoying and frustrating thing is he loves a drink and he's great fun off the field. Yeah. So I'd love to just say he was an absolute nose, but he's not. And I think we've always had a good relationship and we've always had a good friendship, and he's a fucking annoying one.
Kind of got it all. But tiresome, that.
Yeah, but he's like one of those guys as well that when I go to kind of either speak at a dinner or you're sitting at a dinner and there's a sharp intake of breath and you think, oh God, what's this person going to ask me now? And they go, so who was the best person you played with or against? And he is always my answer. Brian O'Driscoll was by far and away the best player I played against. There's a few moments both for England and for Wasps, but one that sticks out in particular was Wasps versus Leinster. In Leinster, and he got the ball at centre, went round our outside centre, chipped it over the winger, then ran round, volleyed it at full speed over the top of the fullback, caught it and scored. And I was just like, I don't know that I have got any of those skills. I've never seen anyone. It's sort of unfair. It was like he had operated some sort of cheat code, or he just gone to a different zone. I mean, he talked about not being in the Matrix, but he was fully in a different dimension for that. And also, the fact is, as Mike said, and he said himself, his ability over the ball. We all know those players that have the skills to do things, but to actually get down and dirty and be really competent at it, from one sort of breakdown noise to another. I always tip my cap to him, and he was always someone in analysis that we had to really watch. Because if you ran near the rest of the forwards, it'd be Mal. If you ran near those two, it was scythe your legs and he'd be on top of you and you couldn't get him off. So I thought it was partly to do with the secret fingerless gloves we talked about, but sadly I think he was just a bloody good player. And what all the Irish boys report back is great on the piss, great guy, real energy giver, just a legend of a bloke, as Mike has said, and it's slightly galling. And he's not too bad looking, and he hangs around with Niall Horan, and he's got like loads of cash because they get the tax back, don't they, when they play in Ireland? That's why the players never leave Ireland. Have they? Well, they stopped it after he did because they took half the national deficit. When he said he's going to his country retreat, you mean they've just tarmacked part of the West Coast and put his castle there?
Oh man, it's Bod's world and we're all just passing by. Well done, chaps. Lots covered this week, actually. We will leave it there for now, though. A very quick reminder, you were talking about the work you were doing with O2 actually earlier. O2's Touch social channels are the place to head if you are looking for a pickup game this weekend. Events in Manchester, Newcastle, Nottingham and Bristol at O2 Touch. For more information, it's time to get your boots back on. The game really needs everyone who loves, has played and wants to get back into it right now. Well done, fellas. Task and Hins. That's like a cop show, isn't it?
Task and Hins?
Yeah. Task and Hins.
There's a T-shirt.
Task and Hins. 1970s cab duo.
Hins. Inspector Task.
Inspector Task
wearing a trench coat, just really clumsy,
Detective
awkward,
Hins.
can't get it right. And Hins is really frustrated in black tie with a Bruce Lee collar on.
A cop who wears black tie.
Yeah, no. You know Bruce Lee or one of those always wore the white shirt, but the sort of the Chinese collar.
Full suit.
Yeah, full, but doesn't. It's kind of a rounded collar that doesn't have buttons. Yeah, I can imagine him that, and shiny black shoes with white socks.
Right,
and he's always just rolling his eyes, then hitting people.
You've just turned me into sort of a blend of Michael Jackson and someone else, which I'm not sure I'm comfortable with.
Moonwalking your way out of crime scenes.
Utter garbage in which to finish what has hopefully been a very enjoyable show with, as we said, one of the GOATs. Have a wonderful week. That is it for The Good, the Bad and the Rugby in partnership with City Index. Once again, we're back next week. Until then, here's Rob Brydon. Bye-bye.